Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Poverty, Promise, and Possibility Community Forum. See lots of familiar faces out there, and I want to thank you for showing up. Our friends Diane Gibson from the Chicago Children's Museum is here. Our friends from the Grand Boulevard Federation, Winning Words After School program, Neighborhood Schools program, of course the great students from Kennedy King College, Odyssey Project students. Really good to see everyone here on this warm, supposedly spring evening. I'm Bart Schultz, the director of the Civic Knowledge Project. You have a handout here on your chairs, right? This is basically all about getting in touch with the Civic Knowledge Project. My telephone number, email are on this so that we can hear from you, get your ideas, suggestions, future involvement. The Poverty, Promise, and Possibility Initiative has been going all academic year. We've had a number of talks. This is our second community forum. We're going to be picking things up again in the autumn. This is, by the way, the last event for the spring. So if you have seen that brochure that had a couple of events listed for late May and June, right? We've changed that schedule. Please check the Poverty, Promise, and Possibility website or get in touch with me to find out what the schedule looks like now. We're going to pick things up in autumn, and then we're going to be adding a number of new events, new speakers, more community forums, lots of material on education. So what we really need is your help in organizing these activities. We're trying, especially with the community forums, to get a lot of feedback, a lot of involvement, your suggestions for future participants, people you'd like to hear, and so forth. So I really mean it. Please do give us a call, email, or whatever, so that we can find out what you're thinking, how you think we can improve this program, and most importantly, how we can bring it together, put it into a curricular program such that the Poverty, Promise, and Possibility materials can be used in our local schools for a wide range of educational purposes. So I can't repeat that often enough. We really want your feedback. Please do get in touch with me. Tonight, we've got a spectacular panel here. And to do the introductions, I'm going to turn things over to my friend and colleague, Shaz Razul. Many of you know him. He's the director of the Neighborhood Schools program here at the University of Chicago, a terrific community connection in himself. He's going to moderate tonight's panel, make sure that our questions move along, that all of the important points get made, and so forth. So please give him a warm welcome, Shaz Razul.
Thank you. Thank you. The Neighborhood Schools program at the University of Chicago is one of the oldest programs at the university that works to help get university students into the community to support local schools, along with the university's Community Service Center. Thousands of students get an opportunity to make a real impact in the surrounding community. One of the greatest parts of this work is to be able to put students in touch with dynamic leaders in the community who are not waiting for anyone to give them solutions, but who are really going out there and making a difference themselves. And I'm very privileged today to be moderating this panel with three of these dynamic leaders. And I'm so glad that you're able to be a part of this here today. So today we've got Thom Hale, who's the president of the Montessori Network and is doing fantastic work in Englewood. Dr. Bonnie Claudia Harrison, who is a social anthropologist and activist, and one of the leaders of the Kennedy King Community College, although she wouldn't call herself a leader, and Phillip Jackson, who's got a tremendous career in city government and activism and is well known for his work with the Black Star Project. So what we're going to do today is we're going to let our panelists talk a little bit about their work, Panelists, we're going to try to keep the opening remarks to about 10 to 15 minutes. That way we can have plenty of time for questions and dialogue from the audience. So I'll give you a warning at 2 minutes. So Thom, you get to go first.
Thank you very much. Thank you. My name is Thom Hale. I am the president of the board of the Montessori Network, an organization that is has worked for several years in the Inglewood community. Before I describe what we're doing, I would like to just say that for the 10 or 15 years or so that I've been working in education in Chicago, I've never found anyone that doesn't agree that there's a big need and a critical need to work on getting the opportunities for education for children across Chicago going. There are interesting differences in processes and details and how to do it, and but everybody agrees that there's a real need. So I want to thank Bart and the people organizing these sorts of things that bring people together to see how we can make a difference and actually start doing things and continue doing things in that regard. The Montessori Network has a vision to bring the Montessori education to underserved communities. Our executive director has been a teacher and administrator of Montessori schools for the last 25 years. Several years ago, we were invited into a public school, a traditional public school in Inglewood called Stagg Elementary, which is at 74th and Morgan, to help the principal who had started early childhood Montessori classroom at that school with her discretionary funds, and brought in a wonderful teacher. And she asked us to come in and help support that program and expand it. And for the last several years, we've been doing that. And now there are a little over 80 children in the program at Stagg Elementary that in 3 classrooms. They are 2 early childhood in the Montessori parlance, that's 3 years old to 6 years old. And there's one what's called 6 to 9, which is 1st through 3rd grade classroom at Stagg Elementary. The community fit our mission, and we decided to expand the program and applied last year for a charter school, and were accepted in the February board meeting to open a Montessori school in Inglewood, which will hopefully, if contracts get signed, at 71st and Honore, which is the Archdiocese building in West Inglewood. We'll be starting with 3 classrooms in the fall of 2012 and organically grow up through 8th grade. Montessori education is based on, or the approach for Montessori is that all children pass through the same stages of intellectual development, each one which requires a particular type of learning experience, so that no child learns at the same rate. Every child is unique, and freedom within limit harnesses a child's innate motivation to learn. The Montessori is very tactile, the learning through experience, and with the use of concrete learning materials. The Maria Montessori was the first female physician to graduate from the Italian medical schools, and started her method over the course of many years in the inner city of Rome. So it was a pedagogy and a technique, and a very disciplined technique for the kids of the inner city of Rome. So so we encourage anybody that's interested to talk further, and hopefully in a year or so we'll have a successful opening of a school. Thank you.
Okay. So Thom, I'm going to get a jump on the questions right here. What's been the hardest part about opening a school, a Montessori school in Englewood?
It's probably the same as the process of working through CPS has been interesting. The trying to explain what a progressive education, what Montessori education is all about is a challenge and an important one. It's whether there have been questions of whether the pedagogy and the process will work with the Englewood demographic and the social situation in Englewood. And so we've had to explain to many people that the approach. The others are very practical. Chicago and Illinois is at the bottom of the list, if not the bottom of the list, is close to the bottom of the list in the country in terms of how it funds schools. And so it's the financial side, and to build a workable long-term business plan is a challenge, independent of your pedagogy. So my background, I'm an engineer, and I grew up in the pharmaceutical. I have a business that designs pharmaceuticals, and the business models in pharmaceuticals are very long-term and high risk and very expensive. And I think it's a good fit for education, that you have to think in terms of decades and not in terms of quarters or years even, that in terms of how you gauge success and how long you stick with it. So I think building and selling successful business models is a challenge for all schools.
I'm going to sneak one more in. Why Englewood?
We were invited to come to Englewood. We wanted to take the Montessori, take the human and financial capital that we hopefully could bring to underserved communities in Chicago. And we were invited in by Ruth Miller, the principal at Stagg Elementary, to help with her program. So after several years there, we realized that this fit our mission, and so we decided to stay and expand the program in Englewood.
Thank you. Dr. Harrison?
Hello. My name is Claudia Harrison, and I am a Longhorn. Got my my degree at Texas. But I'm a townie. Grew up here in Kenwood, and did some postdoctoral work here at the university. Went to Kenwood Academy. What I do is I develop initiatives to train community leaders in the Englewood and Woodlawn communities, and I work particularly at Kennedy King College. And what we contend is that the organization that I run is perhaps unique in its efforts to try to take college students and get college students to go inside of their communities and work with the people that they know to build and organize. I'm not saying that there aren't other organizations out there, but I think we're sort of an indigenous organization, and we work on a very small level to build leaders. So I want to point out, and I'm sure you already know this, but in Englewood, we're at the door of poverty, impoverished education, joblessness, the school to prison pipeline. HIV/AIDS rates are out of control in Englewood. The violence level is out of control. The domestic violence level is out of control. Lead poisoning is the highest in the country in Englewood. We have a food desert, and there is human trafficking out of control in Englewood. And on top of that, we have police brutality. So I want to point out that Englewood is the place to find leadership. It is the place where quite honestly, I don't think that, as our speaker, as Yas said, we can't wait for big government to come in. I sound like Republican, I'm not. We can't wait for government to come in. We can't wait for someone from outside of our neighborhood to come in. We can't wait for big leaders who are running around the country looking at television cameras. We can't wait for folks out, you good folks here, even us good folks here in Hyde Park. We can't wait for, that's a famous saying, isn't it? We can't wait. The time is now. And what we need is, we need to empower our young people. We need to listen to our young people. I remember being a teenager, I was a punk rocker, and I used to spray paint all over Hyde Park, so sorry about that. But yeah, I was pretty angry. And I remember thinking, who's gonna save us? Who's gonna fix this? This world sucks. And the level of injustice, even growing up at Kenwood Academy, right, relatively privileged, growing up under the, most of my friends' parents were professors at the university, so, whatever, we knew a lot. We had a lot of information at our fingertips, but we just didn't know how to solve problems. I was lucky because, I am a Hyde Parker, or Kenwood Hyde Parker, and I did grow up with a bunch of tree-hugging hippies who taught us that you can stand up for things you believe in. And I was fortunate to be able to listen to people like Stokely Carmichael when he spent the last few of his years coming into Hyde Park and speaking. I was lucky to be able to work with Angela Davis. I was lucky to be able to run into some Alinskyeites and some post-Alinskyeites, people who are critiquing that method. And so I've taken those methods and try to pull them together and look for leaders in our community. So what are we doing? We're looking for people. What's a leader? We're looking for people with head, heart, guts, and feet. You may have heard that if you're an organizer, if you've been in organizing circles. You've got to have a head. You've got to be able to think on your feet. You've got to be able to plan long term. This is a long term. We didn't get into this situation in the short term, and it's going to take a while for us to undo and reconnect and do what we need to do. We need people with heart, and that's a really big one. We need people who care about other people, and that's really hard growing up in this civilization, isn't it? Where we're taught to compete with each other, we're taught individualism is best, But we need people who are we people as opposed to me people. I look for students who say things like, oh, the old ladies on my street, oh, that's bad, wait. The elderly ladies on my street are, they're having a hard time getting their groceries up the stairs. I'm looking for that. That's all it takes, folks. Just look for somebody who says, oh, well, that's terrible the way they're treating that person. That's a leader right there. They care. We're looking for people with guts. Do they have courage? Are they willing to? I'm pretty honest. I'm brutally honest. It's my mother's fault. And you need people who are going to be able to take some criticism, be able to try some things and fail, and get back up again. You need people who are willing to try to stand up to injustice. Right? What did Frederick Douglass say? You need people who are also, and usually I find those three. I usually find those three things. I usually find people with head, heart, and guts. It's the getting on your feet and getting stuff done. Because everybody goes, well, what can I do? I don't know. It's just terrible what's going on in Guatemala. What can I do about that? I don't know. So getting people to get on their feet and figure out what can be done. So I want to just, I'm so entrenched in the field, and I know all of us are, that it was hard for me to think, okay, God, what do I say to an audience? I have to think about what it is I actually do every day. So I'm just going to revert, if you allow me, I'm just going to revert back to my typical training. So I'm going to turn this into a training just for a second, if that's okay. So we're going to do 7 steps. And if you've got a notebook, go ahead and write them down, because we need this. You need to spread this as much. It's not personal. I don't care. You don't even need to remember my name. Just do this work. First, you need to build a team. And what you need, what is a team? It's a group of like-minded people. There's an old saying in the black community, I hear it all the time, oh, if we could just be unified, if we could just get together and agree on something, forget about it. Don't wait for unification. Don't wait for unity. It's not going to happen. We're different people. We have different likes and different desires. Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth disagreed about who was supposed to get the vote first. But they agreed on whether slavery was bad or not. They could figure out an idea and an issue, and they worked on that issue. If they stood around arguing about whether we should vote for for women to have the vote, just to be enfranchised just like men, where would we be? We don't need unity. We need to sit down and talk to one another and find out, well, what argument, what issue can we work on? We've got, in our community, we've got Muslims, we've got traditionalists, indigenous people, we've got, Christians, and I mean, come on, really, we're gonna agree on something? No, not in the larger sense, but we could figure out, well, do we think that dealing with the wastewater in our community is the most important issue, or do we need more gardens? I mean, there's something we can all agree on, and what I challenge you to do is in your conversations with your neighbors, because yeah, you got a homework assignment, you got to go talk to your neighbors, and find out what you have in common with them. It's so easy for us to figure out what we don't like about people and what we don't have in common with people, but figure out how to build a team around you. And you may belong to 10 different teams, and that's great, and that's fine. So that's your first step, build a team. The second thing is figure out what your issue is. Do that process. Figure out what you care about. I don't care how big or how small the project is. Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture used to say, he doesn't care if you organize around the fact that you love goldfish. Just get together and organize. Just get together regularly with people. Figure out what it is you guys can agree on. There's a story I want to tell you, but I'm going to give you this list first. The third thing is research your facts. Find out what the issues are. What exactly is going on with your issue? In Inglewood, we have the highest lead level, not in the city of Chicago, not in the county of Cook, not in the state of Illinois, but in the United States of America. You can walk into Inglewood and just breathe lead. That's how bad it is. That's where we work. I have a student, one of my students, who ate a lead chip paint when he was a kid, and he was a star basketball player. And over the last 10 years, his hearing has degenerated so badly that he can no longer play. I mean, that's just one story about the lead. And so that's his issue. Don't let anybody give you an issue that you don't care about. If your issue is HIV/AIDS, because you're, running around and whatever. If that's your issue, if that's what you care about, if that's what you worry about, then go work on that issue. Don't come work on my lead issue with me in Inglewood, because your heart's not going to be in it. Work on the issue that you care about, and don't let anybody make you feel guilty. You should come and help us save, the Colombian prisoners. Well, if that's your issue, then you should work on it. If it's not your issue, wish them luck. Bake them some cookies and send them on their way, and have solidarity and do some trainings together on how to better do what you're trying to do. That's great. And build this community, right? So, okay, I was on research. Figure out what's going on and figure out what it is that you can do. This is where it gets hard. Try to figure out who it is that has power over what you're trying to change and negotiate with those people. Mistake that my students often make, or that folks make when they're angry, because I can get people real riled up and real angry, and that's important as long as we direct that energy, is they want to go out and they just want to go march. Let's go march. Why? What's that doing now? There was a time when marching was your life. There was a time, the Freedom Riders, right? WYCC, our station, Channel 20, is going to have the Freedom Riders American Experience on Monday night at the 16th. So you guys watch that. I mean, these folks signed their wills before they left, because they knew that marching through Mississippi and Louisiana could be their life. But that's no longer the case. I mean, I don't know, unless you want to go on an army base. I don't think you're really sacrificing anything by marching, but the first thing you can do is, first of all, send a letter, call somebody, send an email, find out what's going on. It's a possibility that the folks who are oppressing you, or the folks who are creating a situation that's untenable for you, just simply don't know. It's possible. So let's start there. So let's start communicating with the people who can make a difference. Then once you've done that, you want to publish your results. You want to tell people about what it is that you've done. If you've gotten a promise from these folks, so whoever it is, whoever the target is, whoever is going to help you change the situation, if they promised you that they're going to help you, publish that somewhere. Put out a newsletter. Say, we met with, the University of Chicago, and they said they were going to help us build this garden. Okay, put that somewhere, okay? So that there is a record that the people need to be held accountable. If you can tape the meeting, do it. There's more to this. I'm not the the end-all be-all of this information. I'll give you a couple of I'll give you at least one name where you can go to find more information. And finally, if you then need to march, if you've done everything, if you've negotiated, if you've said, hey, you said you were going to do this for us, that's when you get to placards, that's when you start marching, that's when you start making a fuss and a scene, and that's when you start boycotting, and you can imagine how high and how deep and how rich and how far you want to go with this. Now, I'm a progressive, I'm not a radical, just so you're clear on that. I believe in clear, practical progress moving forward. I think we have to teach sustainability in this movement rather than, people flying off the handle, which, I work with college kids, so this may not apply to some folks, but my students they just got all riled up and they want to go and change the world, and that's great. But it takes, like you said, it's a long, it's a lifestyle, really. And so I'll give you a quick example and I'll be done. The example comes from Shell Trap, The Dynamics of Organizing. I don't know if you haven't read this book, please do. It's a wonderful, I recommend it. It's a wonderful, wonderful text. The Dynamics of Organizing, Building Power by Developing the Human Spirit. And that's exactly what has to happen. We don't need to rely on lots of money from corporations or funders or that kind of stuff. It's about developing the human spirit. It's about me sitting down with you and talking to you and finding out, why do you always wear all those great colors? Every time I see you, you're fabulous. It's amazing. And I know who you are because of that. There's something that I want to know about you. And if I connect with you and then he connects with the person behind him and then I connect with that person, guess what? We have a team, we have a community. That's all it takes, is you to turn to the next person next to you and spend 20, 30 minutes talking to that person. I guarantee you, I'm a social scientist, I guarantee you have something in common with that person. There's no way you can't, as human beings. So anyway, there's a great story out of Shell Trap's Dynamics of Organizing, Building Power by Developing the Human Spirit, where he talks about going into a community. I forgot the name of the community. It's a West Side community. I apologize if anybody knows. Does anybody know this story about the shopping carts? No? You know that story?
I know.
Which Shell Trap?
No, I just know that shopping carts, like there's a sticker.
Right. Okay, well, let's see if I can jog your memory. Let's see if you can remember this, what the neighborhood is. It's not Avalon. No, it's anyway, so the idea is that Shell Trap is an organizer in the 60s, and he says, well, I'm going to go in this neighborhood and help work on the schools. And so, he's a good guy, and he wants to build a team because he knows how this works. And he starts knocking on doors. Hello, hello, I'm here to help you work on the schools. The schools are segregated and they need some help and blah, 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 blah. And then people go, oh, that's very nice. This white guy comes up to their door and they're, okay, thanks, that's great, I'm glad you care. But what I really care about is these shopping carts. There's all these shopping carts in the street, and my car, my Cadillac that I worked so hard to get is getting nicked. And it's really making me angry. He goes, oh, okay. Well, thanks, ma'am, and he goes to the next one and talks to a vet, and yeah, okay, well, it's important that we help the kids. But these damn shopping carts. The shopping carts are in the street, and they're everywhere, and these people are just putting the shopping carts, and he goes to door to door to door, and people are, he wants to work on education. He wants to work on education, and the people are saying, they're talking about the shopping carts. So Shell goes to the bar, and he gets drunk, and he wakes up the next morning, he's at the bar, and he says to himself, he goes, these people, they're so dumb. I'm trying to help them with this education thing, and all they're talking about these shopping carts, and he gets drunk and drunk and drunk, and he goes to sleep, and he wakes up, and he's got two problems now. One, how do I connect with people on education issues? And two, now he's got a headache because he was stupid, and he drank a bunch of alcohol, and that didn't help anything because he's by himself. That's another reason. So he starts thinking, he goes, wait a minute, okay. All right, let's go back to the people. Because what, audience, what do the people want? They want to work on the shopping carts. You have to listen to the people. So he goes and he goes back to those doors and he says, all right, let's work on the shopping carts. What do we do? What's the first step? You got notes? Build a team. So he goes and he says, okay, we're all going to meet at so-and-so's house on Saturday. They all meet and they start talking about the shopping carts. Well, what's the problem? What do they want to do? They want to do what? They want to get rid of the shop. They don't want any shopping carts all over the place. So then what's the third step? They got to do the research. So what do they do the research on? Where do the shopping carts come from? Those are my students back there. You better know the answer to this. Right. So where the shopping carts come from, right? The local grocery store down the street. So they're continuing the process of doing, what's the next step? Talking to the store manager. So the store manager, this is the 60s now. So they said, well, if you could just put up those bumpers, right, then we could solve the problem. You can have, you know, shopping carts are expensive. So they figured they go talk to this guy. It's not going to be a big deal. No problem. You know, he's going to want to help us. It's going to be a win-win situation here. Fabulous, right? The guy goes, if you people hadn't moved into this neighborhood in the first place, we wouldn't have this problem. Okay, all right. So they talk to the guy, and the guy goes, oh yeah, and I'm going to call the cops on you too. You better get out of here, you know. And so they're, you know, really frustrated and really sad because they thought they had the perfect solution. So guess what? It didn't. Their negotiation didn't work. They went and told everybody. So they published by just telling everybody what happened. Oh, that guy, you know, he sucks. And then they decided that what they were going to do was they were going to pull an action because they realized this guy, you know, he's using the so-called race thing, and the neighborhood's changed. He's not accepting them as his neighbors. So they figured, you know, let's just pull an action. And that's I mean, you know, I wasn't there, so I didn't have anything to do with that. But that's the decision they made. So he goes, so they all decide during the week they're going to borrow, right, the shopping carts. And so they you know, people start taking, you know, they're taking the shopping, he doesn't seem to care, right? So they take all the shopping carts. So soon, you know, of course, the guy, what are they doing? They're making an impact. Now, this is totally illegal, so I'm not recommending this. But they take the shopping carts and they say, well, they call the police department and they say, you know, they're playing both sides against, right? They say, well, listen, you know, we want to help Mr. Grocery Store guy, and we're gonna have a parade on Saturday, and we're gonna collect all the shopping carts in the neighborhood, and we're gonna take them back to the store, and we're gonna help Mr. Shopping Cart Man, right? So they do this on Saturday morning. They gather, they, you know, they have this parade, and they take all the shopping carts down there, and it's a big deal. And the guy's outraged. He comes out, you people, you know, I'm gonna call the cops. And so the cops are like, dude, they're trying to help you. You know, they brought all these shopping carts back to you, and what are you complaining about? So they did their research, they connected with people, they called the cop, they did everything right. And guess what happened? Those bumpers were up by the end of the week. This is a great story of organizing. Of course, what happens next with that community? What do they do? What they're looking around going, we're great, we did it, right? And you've done what? Start back over. Last step is evaluation, if I didn't tell you that. You think about what you did right. If you made some mistakes, you go back and you start over again. They looked at what they had done, and they realized that they could work really well together. And they started the process over. Guess what they started working on? Education issues. So that's Shell Trap, the dynamics of organizing, building power by developing the human spirit. At Kennedy King College, we have the Social Justice Committee, and I want to just say that learning through experience is a phrase that you used. I use those kinds of organizing tools to teach young people and to help young people grow and open up. We've had people like, I have a student who never left the city of Chicago, just through our own efforts, wanting to help each other. This young man was able to go to Detroit and to an organizing event, to the US Social Forum, and we went to SOA in Atlanta, outside of, no, not in Atlanta. Where's SOA? Fort Benning, Georgia, right. So just being able to see these things has helped. This is a young man who, you know, just a typical guy you'd see standing on the corner over there. He actually lives in this, where's the complex? He lives down the street, down here. You know, somebody you might pass by and dismiss, you know, just a brother hanging on the corner, you know. Best guy you ever meet, just because he got some opportunities to go and to think, and we challenged him. We kind of rough on him because we told him about himself a few times. But he took the challenge, and he said, yeah, you're right, I can do something. I can make a difference. Two of my students were recently elected. One was just recently elected to the president of the school, which is scary. And the other one is now sits on the board of trustees. And I have to tell you that from the family that she comes from, everything has changed now. She is now sitting on the board of directors for the city colleges, and her family now, everything has changed for her family. nothing will ever be the same, because now everybody who comes after her will say, yeah, we had somebody in the family who sat on the board of directors, just because she learned from a small organization of people who got together, read everything they could, follow the 7 steps of social change, that's what those are called, and keep trying. Thank you very much.
So, quick question, if I can get a quick answer.
Oh, okay.
Quick question, if I can get a quick answer. Biggest surprise that you've run into doing this work with young people?
Oh, man. I'm bad at this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Biggest surprise. Really, that my students were able to, that I can let go as an organizer, that I can trust them. You know, that 20-somethings look at you like you're crazy when you talk, you know, but they're actually absorbing the information. If you say something decent, you know, people, they actually, you know, all right, you old lady, you know, sure, okay. And they actually go, and they actually did, and they ran this campaign by themselves. I've seen my students, if I you know, because I'm sort of a mother hen, I've just seen them blossom. The fact that they just blossom, you just put a little bit of fertilizer on them, kick their butt a little bit, and whoosh, and you've got 10 me's running around.
Bravo, thank you. So continuing our theme of not waiting for grand solutions to big problems, the incomparable Phillip Jackson.
Thank you. Thank you. Educate or die, organize or perish. I'd like to acknowledge a few people in the room. Linda Ford is back there, and Lafayette Ford. Those are two of my teachers, so if y'all don't like anything I say, sit down. I'd like to represent Stan Jandrizak, big member of the Black Star Project, Mr. Stan, and Jamie Gardner, our director of programs. And I start you off with the story of the Iceman. 200 years ago, back in 1811, a guy was on a boat, and they was going through the Arctic. It was like a cruise, one of them cruises, and they hit kind of like an ice floe, and the man fell into the water. And it was so cold. You know, this is before that global warming stuff with what's his name, you know. He fell in, and he quick froze. And he was frozen. And this year, one of those cutters, one of those Coast Guard cutters did go through the Arctic again, and they saw this thing in the water, and yeah, maybe it is global warming because it was starting to thaw out, and they reached down with these big old thongs, and they picked them up, and they put them on the boat, and they said, wow, we have an Iceman. And so they slow thawed him out, and then they brought him back to Chicago. And they brought the Iceman back to Chicago. Now, remember, he had been frozen for 200 years. And the Iceman came back to Chicago, and he said, I don't know where I am. I'm out of time. He looked at the cars and said, look at those buggies without horses. And then he looked up at the skyscrapers, and he said, I've never seen a building over 3 stories. And he looked at people getting on a CTA bus, and he said, look, it's eating them. And he said, I am lost. I do not belong in this time. But then the Iceman, he found something that was oh so familiar. After 200 years of being frozen in ice, he went into an American school. He said, hey, I know what this is. He said, this is the way that we used to do it when I was growing up. He said, that's a teacher. Yeah, she's at the front. Yeah, that's a blackboard. He said, well, is that a whiteboard? Now they're doing it a little bit differently. But he said, it's still the same. And after 200 years, there were 2 things that were still the same that the Iceman recognized. He recognized the schools, and he recognized the prisons. After 200 years, they had not changed. Welcome to 2011. In 2011, we got public schools, small schools, private schools, charter schools, magnet schools. We've got direct instruction curriculum, whole language curriculum, African-centered curriculum. We've got more highly qualified teachers. We've got stronger principal leadership. And we've got more money going to education. The only thing that we don't have, especially in Inglewood, in Woodlawn, in Bronzeville, on the west side, in Detroit, in Atlanta, in New York, we do not have educated, for the most part, Black, Latino, and poor white children. Welcome to 2011. Now, the reason we don't have them is because we, all of us, have made a mistake. And here is a mistake. We're still doing education 1.0. That's what the Iceman saw. This man was frozen in ice for 200 years, and he saw that we're still doing education the same way we've done it for 200 years. That does not work in 2011. And so you have these mega institutions such as the Chicago Public Schools, such as the Illinois State Board of Education, the Illinois Board of Higher Education, and even the U.S. Department of Education. You have these mega boards that have come together to conspire to basically perpetuate themselves and, for lack of a better analogy, to destroy our children. Schools and jails have become interrelated. Schools and jails have almost become interchangeable. When schools fail, jails succeed. But we do nothing. And so there are guys, and you know the guys, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Broad, you know, these super billionaires. They take all of their money and they invest it in old ideas. Old ideas that has brought the United States of America to almost the precipice of non-relevance when it comes to a modern education. So it's time for us to graduate. It's time for us to graduate to education at least 2.0, and there are certain countries around the world that are working on education 3.0. And so in this graduation, the first thing we have to do is throw out a lot of stuff. We're going to have to throw out all that stuff that hasn't worked, and there is a lot of it. We're going to have to throw out school systems. We're going to have to throw out positions and ideas. And what's unfortunate about that, all of us, we're so comfortable with it. We don't want to lose what we have. I mean, you've come up through this education system. It created you. Some of us even love it, and we don't want to lose it. Education 2.0 requires us to throw it out. After we throw it out, we have to create a whole new educational paradigm. We're going to have to lock up the schools. Do you know that in 1961, there was this thing called the Bay of Pigs in Cuba? And you know about the rockets and the missiles that were aimed and whatever, and the Russians here and whatever, and we blinked, or no, the Cubans blinked, and the Russians, they took out the missiles. And Fidel Castro said, oh my God, I'm over here by myself. He said, we have a literacy rate of about 53% here in Cuba, and the only way that Cuba's ever going to be able to survive in this hostile environment is if we can educate the majority of our people to a high rate of literacy. And so during that same year that they had the Bay of Pigs, he sent out what they call the literacy brigades. He went out, and the first thing that he did, now this is strange, you guys aren't going to understand this. In order to raise the literacy rate in Cuba, the first thing he did, he closed down all the schools. He closed down all the schools. And then he trained up farmers, he trained up college students, he trained up ex-felons who came out of prison, and he made them into literacy teachers. And the model was very simple in Cuba at that time. If you know, teach. If you don't know, learn. And he projected out 5 years. He said, in 5 years, I should be able to get the literacy rate of Cuba up to 75%. Maybe close to 80. Do you know that in 8 months, after he sent everyone into the hills, into the fields, up into the mountains, after 8 months, the literacy rate of Cuba was over 90%. We have got to infuse education into the communities out here. The communities that you say you want to help, do they really want your help? Do they value what you value? We and they themselves, we've got to infuse education into it. And we have to do something that's real. If I haven't scared you yet, I'm about to. You have got to teach them to take control of their own education. I mean, some of us are so comfortable. We bring education to them. Oh, here's a spoonful of it. Oh, we've already chewed it up for you. Take it. It's good for you. You are killing these people. You have got to teach these, my people, our people. And I'm not just talking about Black and Latino people. I'm talking about everyone in America. You have got to teach them to take control of the education for their children. And it's not just for their children. In 2011, everybody has got to be re-educated. What you learned in 1985, what you learned in 1995, what you learned in 2008 is no longer any good. Everyone has got to be re-educated. And so there has to be new learning. There has to be new content, new context. There has to be new methodology. There have to be new outcomes for education. And we're stuck back in the same education that we were getting and giving in 1811. And so this is what Black Star does. And possibly one or two of you might be interested in joining us in what we do. Number one, we do the Million Father March. On the first day of school this year, we expect 1 million fathers to take their children to school. But it's not just taking their children to school. Then we expect those fathers to volunteer at the school, to become tutors, mentors, chaperones, board members, and to become engaged and involved in their children's education. Last year, we had 800,000 fathers take their children to school in 609 cities. This year, we're working on 1 million, and you can help us. We also have a Real Men Read program. We send men, like the men here, into nursery schools and preschools to read to children so that children can start identifying with reading, the value of reading, the importance of reading, and what reading can do for them. We have a Destination College program where we go into, about 40 elementary schools, and we start teaching 3rd, 4th, 5th graders to start getting ready for colleges like this. Do you know that right now today at many of the Chicago public schools, we have about 15,000 seniors who are getting ready to graduate, and many of them, if not most of them, haven't even been prepped or prepared to go to college. We have a community-based PTA. We do it. We organize our parents. We organize our people. We have a parent university. We have taught 600 classes of empowering parents, of teaching parents to become their first, best, and most important teachers, and teaching parents how to take over schools, This is nothing that you ask for permission. You don't ask people for permission to educate your children. You don't ask people for permission to run your community. You take control, and that's what we teach. We do male and female mentoring. We have a student motivation program where we provided motivational services from doctors and lawyers and bankers and engineers for over 200,000 people since we've started. We have a Father's Club. We do something called Peace in the Hood. Y'all don't know. This is one of the first hot days out here. You will know. The violence is on its way. Did you know that here in the city of Chicago, 90% of the young Black boys between the ages of 16 and 19 will not have a job this summer? Them brothers going hunting. Guess who the game is? It's up to us to become engaged, to become involved, to become the solution. The last thing, Jamie, just for a minute, can you tell them about Parent University? Because we can put you to work right now.
Hi, I'm Jamie Garton. I think you meant Saturday University, but it's all the same. So as you imagine, this is a really hard act to follow, but we have our Saturday University. We're currently running in about 12 sites across Chicago. We're looking to open up 50 sites around Chicago. We're focused mostly on the south and west sides right now, but we have a couple opening up on the north sides. We have small group learning facilities where kids can come for free, and parents can come also to learn, like he was saying, to empower themselves to educate their children, become the first and best parents for their child. We serve all ages. Again, it's free, and we don't have a penny of funding for the program. And it's a volunteer-based program, so we need every single one of you to be teaching on Saturday mornings.
Thank you. Nobody can stop us from educating all of our children, all of our people. Nobody can stop us. If this new superintendent of schools comes to Chicago and tells us that we can't educate our own children, he will get whipped all the way back to Rochester. That's what's going to happen. We educate our children. That's what this is all about. We only ask one thing, that if you don't want to help us, then don't hurt us. That's all we ask. And so, while for so long we have been waiting for Superman, and then we were waiting on Batman, and then we was waiting on Spider-Man, and then we was waiting on Mighty Mouse, and then we was waiting on Deputy Dog. And then we finally found out that we are the heroes that we have been waiting for. Educate or die, organize or perish. Thank you.
Philip, if I could ask you the same quick question. Biggest surprise that you've run into in doing this work?
The lack of institutional support. I would have thought with the outcomes, with the programs, with the ideas that we have, that large institutions would say, wow, here's a guy trying to help us. Instead, we're basically, they're trying to run us out of business. Well, no foundation support. The big foundations go, what do you think you're doing? And a very little real school system support. Here we are adding tremendous value. I mean, we do small group tutoring, raising grade point averages, getting kids ready for college, and school systems go, nope, we're not interested in that. So, I mean, people are not interested. I'm serious. I'm talking about elected officials, school people, foundations. They don't care about this work. And the only thing we say to them, if you don't want to help us, don't hurt us.
Thank you. All right, let's turn over to the audience for some questions. I do need to give a couple of ground rules here. First of all, let's all take a moment to remember that a question ends with a question mark. If what you're going to say ends with a period, it's probably not right for the question and answer session. The second thing is that I think our panelists are going to agree to be around for a little while afterwards. So if what you have to say is really a deep one-on-one conversation with one of the panelists, then they will entertain that afterwards. Our goal is to try to get as many people involved in the question and answer as possible. So are we agreed to those ground rules? All right. Gentleman in the red.
Hi, my name's Kenny Newman. I just moved back here after 15 years in Miami, so I know a little bit about the Cuban problem. Anyway, my question to you, I have been involved in the 2 of the 4 biggest school districts in the country. And if there's one thing I've seen, and I've been a government whistleblower, Title IX. Guess who discriminates the most against black and Latino women? Black men. And I've been there and done that and seen it. And you want to fix Inglewood, and you want to fix Little Village, and you want to fix the Southeast Side, and I know the city as well as anybody. Straighten out the public schools on the athletic side, but not starting at the high school level, starting at the grade school level, where elementary school kids, and especially girls, need sports. You want leaders? Give me girls who are 8 years old who are learning to hit a softball, kick a soccer ball, shoot a basketball. And that is the thing that's been since 1972 when Title IX was passed. The Chicago public schools were violating it from day one. And I know because I've been there. So my point is we can fix Inglewood by giving kids sports programs.
Thank you. So while some of us might be waiting for Superman, the rest of us are waiting for question marks. in the
Title IX as a good beginning.
in the yes, in the Pokemon shirt. And there's a microphone floating around so that
Hello?
everyone can hear your
This is
question.
Sure, yeah. This is from Mr. Jackson. So when you were describing throwing out a lot of the problems in schools right now and trying to replace them with, you know, School 2.0, I know that's
Education 2.0.
Education 2.0. There are many, 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 many things that I'm sure you could offer suggestions for what we should throw out and what we should put in. But I'm curious for some of the ones that really come to your mind, what we should throw away, what we should replace them with.
Thank you for asking. And we don't call it School 2.0 because schools themselves might be the things that we need to throw out. So we call it education/learning 2.0 because the ultimate outcome is not necessarily to have a teacher in front of a classroom teaching, but to have children who are lifelong learners. So that's where we want to go. And what we have found is by building learning families and by building learning communities, that's how we can best get the kind of results that we say that we want. We have found that we can't do it through a school. Schools are great. I'm not saying, and right now, I'm not saying we should throw away schools. So I'm not saying that. I am saying that we should not depend on schools as we know them to be the primary mode of educating, and it's not just children any longer, but educating communities. So that's what I'm saying. So the first thing that I would say is you got to get some buy-in from parents and communities. Hey, you got to get buy-in from gangbangers and drug dealers in this education thing, which is the kind of thing that we do. We try to get buy-in from the whole community, from the people doing stick-ups. We don't care. From the people who are at the University of Chicago or Harvard. Everyone's got to buy into it first, and that's a very difficult thing, but we have found that to be paramount. And we've looked at models, and we've looked at models, successful educational models all over the country, and that's really what they are. Everyone in a community has bought into that concept and push and promote that concept. We have seen very few sustained, effective, long-term models where education radiates out of a school building.
Tom, Bonnie, would you like to chime in on that one in terms of things that should be thrown out or things that should be kept?
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to hold my tongue, but there's this idea floating around that schools are just there to sort of teach people how to pay their taxes, and I think that your Iceman example is excellent. From my own experience, we just did an evaluation of the year of training that we did with the Social Justice Committee, and the students say over and over again, school doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm just here because I'm trying to figure out right? Is that what you all say? I'm looking at you, Lisa. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but when I joined an organization, then I started finding meaning. I started learning things. It started making sense to me. Now I could use what it was that I was learning to solve problems. So, one of the things I tell folks is that at the University of Chicago and Harvard, though I went to a state school and I think they're better. But anyway, no offense. One of the things that you get is problem sets to learn. My students don't get that. They get homework. They get busy work. And so, a lot of times we have to, I break that paradigm. Would you guys agree? I break that paradigm in my classrooms. People are confused by me and confused by what it is we do in the classroom. Yeah, right, exactly. That's what I think. But my students at the end of the day, they say, this was a really confusing but enlightening and hard experience. And I learned so much. I mean, I asked my students, I'm begging my students, did you learn anything? And they go, yeah, I learned this and that and the other thing, and I learned about this. And I teach organizing. Most of the time, no matter what class you take with me, anthropology, sociology, social science, I'm basically teaching organizing. So yeah, I find that we have to teach in the margins. The real teaching happens when people come to you in your office and say, hey, Dr. Harrison, I have this problem. What do you think I should do? And then they try it, and then they come back to you and say, hey, that worked, thanks. Or when they join an organization, it's not the I'm completely enamored with this idea that what we've been doing just doesn't work, and we should just give up on that and try something else.
Well, and not just give up, but to evolve to education 2.0. What we have, I think there's some useful infrastructure in what we have, but we should absolutely not be wedded to it as we are wedded to it. Education is a multi-trillion-dollar business here. You know, a lot of people get paid off of the failure of many children in America.
Absolutely.
Thom?
Yeah, I think two things come to mind to that question. One is that I completely agree that the school as structured in most places is an antiquated process, that they've become very insular in their architecture, in their organization, and they become jails in many places. A school is truly a public building and should be treated as such, that it's in all the ways that have been described. We need to bring the community in and create the school, and it needs to be open. It shouldn't be a place, it needs to be a place that's safe, but safe in the grand sense of what that means, not physical safety, but intellectual safety, emotional safety, social safety, and it needs to be an intimate part of the community. And it was a tenet of what the Montessori, and one thing that I like about the Montessori approach is just that. The other thing that I would throw away immediately is our grand approach of projecting a child as a series of linear equations. The way we assess, the way we test, the way we describe our children is not about the way we would describe our own children. We don't describe our own children as the ability to pass some standardized test as an aggregate or an individual, but we need to start describing our children as what they are and the way we would describe them ourselves, and project that into the systemic way that we look at education.
Give you a round of applause for that. Thank you. Sid, microphone. And then there's a question in the back here. Is number 2, yeah.
My name is Sid Langston, and I'm working with the Grand Boulevard Federation, and Uncle Phil and I have worked together over a couple of years. I guess the template word or words and phrases would be, the question is going to surround workforce development as a 10, 15-year picture, and what each of you would think about, because of the silo effect of some of our institutions, and one that has admitted it publicly that they needed to change that paradigm was IIT. And I think you see more engagement with the community, and IIT is a good example. So that in thinking that we need workforce development, but the workplaces are never mentioned when we talk about things. It's going to school, you continue to go to school, and you continue to go to school. We don't think that if you don't include the workplaces in that curricula, that new knowledge, those resources, then we're going to miss the point, because when they finish the schooling, if I'm caught the workplaces, I don't want them because they're not prepared. But it's because we know we need them. National security, that I think more of the workplaces would be willing to help create real internships, et cetera, such as high-speed rail, things of that nature, the whole interior piece, the environmental piece, and stuff like that. So the question is, what do you have planned for that broad template, workforce development, and how would you get the workplaces, some of our major Chicago institutions, Motorola, we can think of a few others, but that's an example, Siemens, the museum campus, those kinds of things that we're already working with. But I think you're the catalyst to say, because we are implementers, we have solutions, some have been worked on for a while. So the challenge here is support us. If you support us, then you support Uncle Phil, you support KKC, we support the Maserati attitude of how we're going to redo education. And pedagogy, historically in Chicago, has been single track. The European countries, one reason they come and kick our butt is they're multi-track. I think we need to look at that with hands-on. So with that being said, how would you look at workforce development as a challenge to all of us, and how do we incorporate that and take that question to our young people? You know, in closing, that we say I am my brother's keeper. Well, I am my brother. And the they and the them. And they are screaming now because they need an opportunity to come in. And the youth voices must be heard. We must examine adultism, adult protective shields, et cetera, so that we can get this information to our young people.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So workforce development? Workforce development, who wants to?
Well,
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, okay. You know, that's a really sensitive issue for me. It's breaking my heart to try to answer that really well and thoughtfully, because, you know, I do work for city colleges, and if you all have been following the news, you know, I don't know how this video is going to be used, so I'm not going to say too much. But, you know, it is clear that the city of Chicago is struggling to find an identity for its city colleges. It is struggling to make our city colleges a part, a vital and thriving part of this city and of the economy. So where does that leave us? I mean, on the one hand, I want to lay out for you my problem. You know, I'm a social scientist, and you know, my students will even tell you, "What the heck is sociology? What do we do? What is this?" You know, they don't even know, you know, what the value of studying society is, much less humanities, the study of logic or other non-functional educational programs. So we have this problem where folks come into school expecting to be taught a trade. And so we have two schools, the trade school mentality and then the let's educate human beings mentality. And it's really difficult to navigate that. Do you all understand what I'm saying? It's really difficult to navigate that because on the one hand, I want my students to be able to get a job. I mean, that's why they come, you know, 60% of my students are coming because, you know, they want a job and they're motivated to get through the crazy registration process at my school, the bad attitudes that, you know, remind you of the DMV, you know, all that stuff that they have to go through, right, to get to my classroom. And I congratulate them the minute they get there. Thank you. You must be the cream of the crop. You know, educate or die. You know, they are there. They are ready, and they want to know how I'm going to make this money. But what I found is that by educating the human being, by asking people, you know, all of my students have problems. They have serious, I mean, it's so depressing sometimes. You know, I think I have to work on my human spirit a lot because I have to be resilient enough to deal with what my students come in. I mean, some of the stories I hear, folks, are just incredible. I mean, I had 2 sex workers come to me, students of mine who are struggling because they've got to get out there and do their work, and they've got to come to class, and how do you be a prostitute and do your homework? You know, it's just this like, wow, really? Though that doesn't really characterize, I don't want to characterize Kennedy King students that way. That's a, you know, it's a very small minority. And then you've got the young mother who's got 2 kids who wants to get a better job so that she can, you know, feed her kids. You know what I mean? And she's sincere, and it could have been me, you know, pretty easily. But what I found is that by giving my students and challenging them to think, to be critical thinkers, to, you know, solve problems. You know, my students get real mad at me at the beginning of the semester because I don't give them the usual rigmarole. I give them, you know, I put them in situations and, you know, have them discuss things and try to figure things out, and they don't know what the heck I'm doing for a while. And then they figure out, they start coming out of their shells. They stop being sheep. They stop being passive. They stop being who the Chicago public school system taught them to be. They stop looking for busy work. They start going, well, what does this matter? They start asking questions. I've had 22 real questions asked me in 5 years at Kennedy King College about the assignments I have given. 22 questions. When I taught at Tulane University, I had 22 questions in a day. Students asking me, well, what does this mean? What do you think about this? I read this other book. And so that I don't get that at Kennedy King. So my job is to teach people to think and act, well, not to think, but to think, because there's two people that come in my classroom. My students come in as these passive, people who are supposed to just absorb what you tell them to do, and then there's they're who they really are, and they don't bring that real self into the classroom unless you demand that they do. Bring your whole self in here, and try to bring all of yourself, and let's try to grow that whole person. You'd be surprised how schizophrenic this school system makes people. And so I'm more concerned about, once I get people to begin to deal with their problems and begin to solve their own problems and begin to create solutions to their own problems instead of me telling them what to do, or and they're looking for somebody outside of themselves to tell them what to do. Like I said before, there's no limit. They will create jobs. Screw getting somebody's job. They will make a job for themselves. I'm telling you, the kid that is now the trustee, 2.5 years ago, you wouldn't have seen this in her. But because we listened to her, we let her cry, we let her move forward, we asked her to do the hard work. We stuck with her. She's giving me instruction. Hallelujah. To teach them to be teachers, and because I'm not the only teacher in the room, I'm also a student. To teach people to sort of do what they have to do, they'll figure it out. They'll figure out the rest. And it's the problem with Kennedy King, I'm sorry, I'm going on and on about this, but is that employers spend about almost as much time as we do educating. So once we're done in our educational system that he's talking about, employers have to re-educate anyway. And so that's one of the reasons why City Colleges is being targeted like this as a workforce development, because we're so out of touch, I think, with what people need when they get to a job. There's still a gap. People still have to be trained. So there just needs to be a whole lot of really thinking deeply about what do we mean by workforce development and what do we mean by human development, and we can't sacrifice one for the other. Thank you for listening to that whole diatribe.
Amen. So next question's in the back. I think we're at about 10 minutes on the program, so we're in the speed round now. The questions have to be short, and the answers have to be a little bit shorter than we'd like. All right?
Okay. I was recently campaigning in the last election, and there is a public school in this ward that has almost as its unofficial motto, because wherever you walk into the classrooms, this is on the door, and it says X school. Educates our children to work in their world. Not in the world, but their world. Yeah. And I find that statement deeply upsetting. And so I'd like to ask you, Mr. Jackson, and I'm sorry I didn't catch the professor's name, where you would start to change that, because to leave a school like that, I think it is just wrong.
Go ahead, please.
I think we have to believe that all of children are the same. Their circumstances, their stories are different, their surroundings might be different, but the distribution of kids is the same in Inglewood as it is in Lincoln Park. And we have to fundamentally believe it, or we shouldn't be around the children, I don't think. And that the opportunity, we need to unlock the human potential of these children. And to get back to the other question, and their family and their community and the parents, the children don't operate in a bubble. They operate as a combo platter with everybody that's around them, right, which may be the people sitting next to them, but it may be a person sitting in Germany or Angola or Rio de Janeiro. Mm-hmm. that the community is multivariate. For us to survive as a society, we have to release these kids and release their potential. And to put them in that box is the same as the physical box. It's the same as all these other boxes that we put them in. We just can't do it.
Two quick answers, or three actually. Number one, what I would suggest, you can't really do anything with that school. You can't. That's what they do. What can you do with the community around the school would be my first point, or my first answer. Secondly, what I'm talking about, and I believe what we're all talking about right here, right now, is that every child in Chicago, every child in the United States of America should be being prepared to become a responsible global citizen in all aspects, including and I don't know about workforce development. I know what you're talking about. You're talking about them getting a job. But there's so much more to life than simply only just getting a job. And in terms of global development, economically, we absolutely need to be developing these children for that. And oh, by the way, a little advertisement. With the Chicago Public Schools graduating 15,000 seniors this year, right now, today is May, June, they're coming out. Most of them are not going to college, but they have not really been prepared for what they're going to go into. So Black Star is having a employment fair, a career development fair that we would like for you, please, Uncle, to be a part of, so that these young people, we can groom and nurture them into the world of work rather than just throwing them out there, sink or swim. So that's what we're doing. It's in June, the second Saturday in June we're doing it. And everyone here is invited. We expect to get only 200 to 300 students through it, but we're going to have about 25 different vendors and jobs and people who might be able to hire, but people who can train them how to get ready for the world of work. So we will be doing that. Thank you.
Bart.
I just want to interject. In the course of addressing the next questions, if our panelists could please position yourselves vis-a-vis promise zones, promise communities. Are you beyond them? Are you beside them? Are you behind them? At one point, our title was Beyond Promise Zones. In the course of your question, please do.
So on the clock, I think we have time for two more. So in blue.
Where here in the Woodlawn area are you located and doing what you do? Are you just in Inglewood or what?
Black Star is working in 100 schools in the city of Chicago, all over, in 100 schools. Now, I can find out we're on the periphery, either here in Woodlawn or Hyde Park or Kenwood and South Shore and Graham, but I don't know. I can't say. I didn't bring my list of schools. But we will work. We will work wherever you are. I mean, we're not being funded, so they can't tell us we can't go. So just let us know, and we'll figure out a way to make it happen.
I just need to know, is anyone here that's working with the Woodlawn schools per se? Any particular person?
There's a young man, Ryan. There's Ryan. This is a brother who works with the Woodlawn schools, and he can talk with you. It's one of my colleagues.
So let me ask one question here.
She had a question too.
Yes.
What is this incredible university in Chicago? What are they doing in the midst of the South Side of Chicago? What are they doing to help the community, help the kids in the community? Are they involved? That's been a big problem, I think. I don't know if it's changed over the years.
So the university, I think I'm the qualified person to answer this one. So the university is deeply involved in the local community now. It's been a process, but now we're very deeply involved. We're very much a junior partner in all of the Woodlawn efforts that the Woodlawn Children's Promise community is working on, spearheaded by the late Reverend Brasher, and now led by Dr. Brasher. The university, the neighborhood schools program sends over 300 students into 50 schools in the area in order to help support classrooms. The University Community Center sends almost 1,000 students into the communities to work with nonprofits and other organizations. The school, the SSA, the building we're in, trains and supports social workers. The university has a very deep connection to this geographic area, which broadly defined is Hyde Park, Woodlawn, Kenwood, North Oakland, Bronzeville. Now, could the university do more? the scale of challenges that we face in these neighborhoods very high? The answer is yes and yes, and it's a process, and we are certainly trying to do more and to be good neighbors. And let me ask the last question here, because part of this is this promise zone, promise neighborhood discussion that's been out there. How do you feel about the promise zone discussion as a way of, on a federal level, as a way of addressing communities in struggle? We'll say communities that are struggling. And how do you feel about the way it's going? And we're still in the speed round, so.
I think we have to do that. To create a community is a complicated thing. To create jobs, to develop social structures, to get shops and restaurants, and the whole list of things that we're going through can be depressing, it can be overwhelming, and nothing can get done very rapidly. So from my point of view, those are all issues that need to be attacked, but you have to get passionate about your issue and start doing something. And whether that's small or big, smaller is easier, and you can start making progress. So I guess that would be my response, is that at whatever capacity or capability or desire you have, you should start doing that. If that's at a grand scale of the President of the United States, that's one thing, but if it's people sitting in this room, you can start a school, you can show up at a school, you can create a small restaurant that serves healthy food, you can do all of the various things that you can do that add to the equation.
I mean, I would say the exact same thing. I mean, jump in. You know, there's enough work here that, you know, I like what you're saying, you know, just don't get in our way. You know, we're doing what we have to do. I am committed to one-on-one, everyday organizing, person to person. I mean, the benefit of me being here is that I'm now challenged to figure out which of these mentoring programs I have to go to now, and or send my students, which is a better strategy.
Great.
That's how this works. Is we, you know, right now our society is so loose, and we don't talk to. How many of you all talk to your neighbors? I mean, really, you know, do you even know the person you just walk by like that? I mean, it's. Maybe it's because I lived in the South for 12 years, but I find that the network, the society itself is full of holes because we're not talking to each other and we don't know each other. And so, you know, the only thing I would say about big projects from the feds is that's great and fine and dandy, but if they're not involving local people, if they're not listening to the hard criticisms, if they're not responding or letting us, you know, create our own solutions, then they may have to keep pouring that money in, just like Bill Gates. They're just going to have to keep pouring that money in. Whereas if you give us the opportunity to solve our own problems, if you ask people who are having the problems what they think the solutions are, if we tighten this net a little bit, this social net of human beings, then we don't need so much money. We don't need so many other artificial social nets. We have each other.
Yeah, thank you. Does anybody here remember enterprise zones? You remember enterprise zone? First of all, there was a guy, Rodney King, got beat up and whatever, and then they had riots. And then from Washington, they said, we're going to put $100 million on 10 cities in the country, and we're going to create these enterprise zones. They dumped $100 million on 10 each city. And I haven't seen any residuals from that. Now, fast forward to promise communities. And it's a wonderful concept of promise communities. But it's going to go back, I'm going back to what Thom and Bonnie are saying. Nice idea, but what are you really investing in? Are you really investing in people? Or are you doing another big government dance? Because promise communities are big ideas, and I think it's a really good big idea, But you're going to have to see this thing really down at ground level, I believe, if it's going to work. And so the two things. Number one, for promise communities to work, they have to be organic and they have to be natural. They can't be contrived and they can't be something coming from Washington. It's not going to work. And number two, there has to be new thinking coming from government. The same old thinking is going to get us in the same old place. And so I don't see a lot of difference from what they call enterprise zones and these new promise communities with that same kind of thinking. So I'm agreeing, and maybe we're a biased panel, but this has got to be really investing in people, and right now I don't see that.
My take on that is that there are, all communities should be promise communities, and we have to look at each and every community in that kind of way, and just not wait for anyone. So I think that brings us to the close of our formal program, so let's give our wonderful panel a round of applause.